very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. First, let me inform you about Bharata First Knowledge Center, an initiative that will help each one of you and transform the way you learn. You can go to our website kc.bharatafirst.com for more details. Ensure that you look at the FAQs. Most of your questions will be answered there. Register now and avail the limited period early bird discounts. The orientation is on June 30th and live classes start on July 1st. So register now at kc.bharatafirst.com and don't miss out on any of this. Now, since you're here, please, I would like to thank you first for your continued support. And for those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. You can subscribe to our newsletter as well to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs a daily Big Picture quiz. Please do participate by going through the description in Big Picture videos. Here are the UPI IDs for those of you who would like to come forward and contribute. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. In case you have trouble with UPI IDs, you may use our payment link in the description of this video and just follow the steps. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description, so please go through it. And now on to the discussion. United States President Joe Biden met with Afghan leaders Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah at the White House on Friday to demonstrate a continuing US commitment to Afghanistan as US troops withdraw. The bulk of about 4,000 US soldiers now in Afghanistan will be moved out in the next 2 weeks, and the US expects to remove American and coalition commanders by July 4th. In brief remarks in front of media at the top of the meeting, Biden praised Ghani and Abdullah for their difficult jobs and their efforts to bring about unity among Afghan leaders across the board. Ghani offered thanks to American troops and their families for sacrifices in Afghanistan over the past 20 years, but suggested the war-torn country now stands on the precipice of civil war. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the Ghani-Biden meeting and the latest situation in Afghanistan. Joining me on the program today are Shakti Sinha, Director, Delhi School of Public Policy and Governance; Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, retired Director, India Foundation; and Manjeev Puri, former Ambassador. Mr. Sinha, let me start the program with you first. Let's first try and understand and analyze this meeting that Ashraf Ghani and President Joe Biden had in the United States. What does it mean, and what does it mean for Afghanistan as a whole, especially at a time when it's coming when there's so much of turmoil in Afghanistan?
Situation in Afghanistan has really become very, very unstable, dangerous even. But let me start with the visit first. I think this visit should not have taken place. Biden or his US government said nothing that they had not said earlier on. Ghani wanted continued air support to the Afghan security forces. No commitment on that. In fact, actually a no. He met Joe Biden. He brought along a large team. His Vice President Abdullah Saleh, the head of Peace Reconciliation Abdullah, Foreign Minister Hanif Atmar. 51 people in all went for the meetings to USA, of course. Meetings very few went. And they actually got nothing. The US Secretary of State did not even attend a single meeting with President Ghani, because he had made it clear in his letter of February, please step aside and let a transitional government be formed. Now, USA is said that they are committed to working with Afghanistan. They have never said they are committed to working with the government of Afghanistan as presently established by law. So the situation is very clear. The USA has cut its losses. They want to move out. Even though Lloyd Austin in his Senate testimony made it very clear that possibility of Al-Qaeda regrouping and becoming strong in 2 years are there, yet I don't think so the US establishment is going to put a single person on the ground. And therefore, this government of Ghani has losing its coherence completely. The present Afghan political leadership, government, non-government, within the democratic space, nobody wants to work with Ghani. So Ghani is seen as a liability by everybody. Karzai actually has re-emerged as a leader. Again, a very flawed personality, but leaving that aside. In that circumstances, with Taliban making tremendous gains, they took the border town of Sherkhan Bandar with Tajikistan, forcing 150 Afghan troops to actually run into Tajikistan for shelter, basically, right? It's a pack of cards, sad to say, which is collapsing. And when a collapse like this happens, there's no orderly withdrawal. It becomes a rout. The most difficult decision, as the control will tell you for infant person, is to withdraw. If withdraw is the most difficult because you're exposing yourself all the time, right? This is what unfortunately seems to be happening. So going forward, much more violence, no stoppage of violence. Can we have a transition regime? We really don't know. At this stage, possibly not, but I think something will change. Things will change.
Right. General, let me bring you in now. Before we talk about India and, what's at stake for India, because we've spoken about this subject for a long time now, and we all have a fair idea about what really all of this means for India. But in the meantime, let's talk about Afghanistan itself, the government that is in power right now. The Taliban seems to be, just dispersing all of them, the military forces, the special forces. 25 of them were recently killed in a northern district. They seem to be in disarray. Where does all of this leave them and leave the American forces and generally the government that has been in place for the last decade or so?
Frank, I think it's as far as the Afghan security forces are concerned, it is a very serious situation for them. Now, when we are looking at a conflict of this nature, so long as the government at the center is cohesive and there is a straight line of, a chain of command which exists, right? And orders are followed the way they are supposed to be followed, then we can accept losses. Usually, losses do take place. But as Mr. Sinha has very rightly said, when the cookie, as they say, starts to crumble, right? That is the time when the problem comes in, and I'm afraid this is the problem which we are witnessing now. So what you're going to see is that when we are looking at the border outposts, because that is where the trouble is going to start, those are the outposts which are going to start falling to the Taliban in due course of time. But a change will take place after some time. See, after some time, what is going to happen is that the Afghan security forces will be confined towards the center in smaller and smaller areas, whereas the Taliban is going to be expanded. Now, for the Taliban to hold on to that expanded area is going to pose a problem to them. And if the Afghan forces, whatever in whichever manner, they start behaving like the Taliban, then I think it's going to be an all-out war between these two groups, which I have already foreseen, not just today or yesterday. This was our prediction many years back that if the Americans withdraw, we are looking at civil war. So I personally have no doubts about it. You are looking today at a civil war situation. Now, the question really is, who is going to win this war? In my view, I think we are going to end up very quickly in a stalemate, despite the fact that the Taliban, in due course of time, may actually take control over Afghanistan, over Kabul. But they will not be able to rule the country. There is a huge difference between the two. You see, once you are ensconced in the capital, then you've got certain commitments which come up as a government. The persons who are fighting against you are not committed to any rule. So this is the situation of the Taliban as of now. They are in a comfortable situation. They only have to fight. The government has to govern and rule. Now, there are two totally incompatible issues. Had the Americans stayed on with even a small force of, say, 500 to 1,000 men and had committed to give air and intelligence support, the situation would have been dramatically different. I think the Afghan security forces have the wherewithal and the capability to fight. But over a period of time now, there is going to be a problem in that capacity and capability in leadership. Most importantly, I think there is going to be a problem in funding. You require about 3 billion US dollars per year to actually maintain a force of this size. If that money stops coming, both Mr. Sinha and me, we have been, talking about this issue for many, many years. If that funding stops, the Afghan army ceases to exist. They don't have the capacity to pay for a force of that nature. So I think it's going to be a very, it'll be a very tragic development. We are looking at a civil war-like situation which is going to develop. And I am absolutely certain that is not good news for India. But let me also make it very clear. It is not good news for Pakistan. It is not good news for China. It is not good news for the United States or for Russia. I think the only person who's going to be satisfied with that situation is Iran as of now. For the others, I think it's going to be a bad situation. India, of course, we will see as to how we work around it. Frank.
Right then, Ambassador, let me come across to you and let's talk about the forces at play in Afghanistan and what this means for all of them? Because, everyone wants a piece of the pie as far as Afghanistan is concerned, but where it is headed, it's going to be very difficult for all of them, like the general has just pointed out.
Frank, thank you very much. I am very happy to defer to Shakti, who has actually lived and worked in Afghanistan. And of course, General Katoch for his wide understanding of military matters. You mentioned everybody wants a piece of the pie, but is there going to be a pie? I'm not sure of it. At the moment, everybody thinks there's a pie out there. But, and it's all very well for us to say that this Ghani and this combination which has come together and has been there for some time, this will collapse. But will the Taliban be able to take care of it? No, because if you just hear what General Katoch said, those who are born in a certain milieu are not really familiar with the idea of governance, taking things forward. Look, when the Taliban were in control of Afghanistan, what did they do? They did things which brought about trouble for themselves. I mean, had they been able to stabilize things, even a bad government, they would have stayed on somehow or the other. We don't know what the implications of all that is. But they brought down things on themselves. So it's a very tough and difficult task. And I also agree with both General Katoch and Mr. Sinha that, this is not a situation which is going to be helpful to anyone. I want to leave a very different thought to people. I understand that the Americans want to use this expression, cut their losses. After all, every president has been saying it, and President Biden said, I will not be the fifth one. I will not do it. I will do it, go outside. He also has several domestic compulsions behind it. Maybe the entire military industrial complex and the money that could have been got out of the Afghan war is over, and today it's actually draining the US economy. So there are various aspects to it. And I don't want to come into the India-China angle as yet, because that's, I think, a separate subject that we should touch upon perhaps a little later. But I do believe that the world needs to take this a little bit more, let me say, more forcefully and a more focused manner. And since we do have the United States, China to a certain extent, and Russia involved in it, and even France and Germany, I sincerely hope that there might be some kind of a meeting of the minds at the level of the United Nations. Now, out of the blue suggestion, if I may leave with you, this is perhaps a ripe case, although a very difficult case, for some kind of a United Nations peacekeeping operation. A very difficult task. I know it's a very, very difficult task. They have had very great difficulties elsewhere also. But you do need a modicum of some kind of ability to be able to hold even center and some of the key cities. Something needs to be done, because the impact of destabilization on the entire world can be tremendous. As I said, this is an off-the-cuff remark, not perhaps fully thought out, but something is required because it's in the interest of the entire world and all the big powers.
I think I'm totally in agreement with you, Ambassador. Something is required. What is that something? I cannot wrap my head around. Let's see if the other panelists have something to say. Mr. Sinha,
Yeah, in fact,
is there a something? Is there a something that the world can
okay,
do?
they can. What ultimately, what is my understanding, I may be completely wrong. Actually, neither Pakistan, nor is major backer China, nor even Turkey, which is actually doing a lot of groundwork, wants the Taliban to be in actual control. A weak Afghanistan is in Pakistan's interest. The narcotics trade is humongous narcotics trade is because it's a weak and unstable country. A weak and unstable Afghanistan enables the Pakistani army to have a disproportionate say in the running of Pakistan. The Pakistani army would not want a stable Afghanistan. Where I disagree with General Katoch and with my good friend Majid is that the Taliban is capable of running the country, but will not be allowed to run the country because Pakistan wants a client state or a weak state. Pakistan will not allow the Taliban to succeed by strengthening ISK, by strengthening other institutions. So, you are looking at chaos. Also, a number of people have started rebuilding small militias to guard their fiefdoms. They're not warlords in that sense, to guard their fiefdoms, kind of a thing. So, we are heading for the abysses. And therefore, I would think that ultimately the Chinese and the Pakistanis were the two critical players. China has tremendous goodwill in Afghanistan for the fact they spent about $300 million in 20 years, doesn't matter. They have tremendous amount of equity they have in that country. Will be forced to reconcile and bring about some kind of working arrangements of the sort Manjeev was suggesting. That I think is the only rational way out of the situation. But I don't think so. Any country is now willing to send troops to Afghanistan under whatever condition. And now see the Taliban. When Turkey said, we will guard Kabul airport and the embassies, Taliban within hours attacked Turkey and said, you have no business. It's the government of Afghanistan, that is we, the emirate. We will guard the airport and we will guard the embassies. Our sovereign duty to do so. We will not allow any foreign soldier of any country to come into this. So it is complicated. It is complicated. We are looking at uncertain time for some time to go. But you're right. It will be a threat even to Iran in that sense. An unstable Afghanistan will spill over. Millions will go east and millions will go west. The Hazaras will go to Iran and the others will come to Pakistan. Some will end up going to Tajikistan like the soldiers. So we are looking at instability. For America, it's far away. So they feel that they are comparatively, they can distance themselves. But as 9/11 showed, distance is not an issue anymore. And with technologies developing in the last 20 years to the extent that they have, nobody is safe. Nobody is safe if there's an unstable Afghanistan. Absolutely. And that would include Pakistan.
General, coming back to you now, we have to spare a thought for the people of Afghanistan because, it's really sad what they have been going through. And this is not something that is happening now. But historically, Afghanistan has been a very troubled land and they have been through so much of turmoil and it continues. So, what about the Afghanistan?is?
Well, Frank, on a lighter note, there is a very popular saying, if Afghanistan is at peace, the rest of the region is in conflict. And if Afghanistan is in conflict, the rest of the region is in peace. Now, of course, these are simply, loose statements which are made. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, there are two things I think we must consider. One is that over 30% of the population is below 20 years old. And this is the population, both young girls, young women and men, who have never seen Taliban rule. They have actually been over the last 20 years through a different type of life. Now, they are not willing, they will not be willing to get back under the old Taliban rule. But however, should the old Taliban actually promise them that, listen, we will be the rulers, but these are going to be the terms and conditions. Women's rights will be respected. We have, children can go to school and all that. You see, which they are used to now. Then I don't foresee too much resistance of the youth to the Taliban rule. Now, when Shakti said that the Taliban can govern, no, you see, my entire contention was different. The contention is not whether the Taliban can govern or not. The contention is if one party is in governance and there are other parties who are not in governance, the parties not in governance can always create conditions for the party in governance not to govern. That is what is happening now. That is the point. So if the Taliban is in governance, you will have alliances like the Northern Alliance coming up who will be fighting them without any consequence. So now when the Northern Alliance fights, they don't have to worry about governance. They will simply blow up schools and buildings and leave it to the Taliban to actually secure every area, which they will find difficult to do. So ultimately, governance requires a measure of peace and stability within the country. Otherwise, that governance goes. So whether it is the Taliban or the present government or anybody, I think they will go through the same boat if you have that level of opposition within the country. The second thing is, as far as the women are concerned, I think it is going to be very difficult for the Taliban now to impose their will on a generation which has not seen this. And my own feeling is, and my interview of one of the ladies who was a member of parliament, where she very clearly stated in that interview that if it comes to that, then we will resist. That means that the women will resist. Now, you really cannot force, it is not just 2 or 3 women, we are talking about the entire population. So can the Taliban really impose its will? That is something which we have to see. But in my own reading of the situation, you see, the Afghan people are in for trouble. There is nothing India can do about it. We are not a player. today there is nothing which the Americans can do about it. And should the Americans come back again now, which I hope they don't, because it'll get even worse. You see, very rightly said by Mr. Sinha, they shouldn't have actually had those talks with the Taliban earlier, and they shouldn't have had these talks now, because every time they carry out the talks, the government gets weakened. So today, I mean, the meeting, as in my personal opinion, has been a disaster. I don't know why they have gone, but the question is the credibility of the government keeps going down with every meeting with the Americans. So the Americans are going to be out, but the cost of actually maintaining peace, which the Americans were, bearing that cost, they have said it very clearly. Now you foot the bill. The Chinese, will they foot the bill? I have very serious doubts. From my own interaction again with the Ghanaian political leadership, the few elements whom we met, they made it very clear that China is not a major player in China. I beg your pardon. China is not a major player in Afghanistan. Pakistan is, but they added very clearly, China will do what Pakistan tells them to preserve their interest. So what China is doing is a very clever game. They are putting the Pakistanis in the front. So the consequences will be borne by Pakistan. The fruits will be taken by China. But I think it won't be a good situation for anybody. The Central Asian republics, which are bordering Afghanistan, for China, for Pakistan. India, fortunately, we are far away to that extent. But there's one point which I would like to just share this thought, especially Frank, with your readers, with your viewers, and that thought is this: there has been a feeling amongst many that if peace comes into, I beg your pardon, if the Taliban come into power, then a large part of those the terror groups which are there, they will be diverted to Kashmir. Now, I have my doubts. That is not going to happen. Please take it from me. It's not going to happen. It is a different India today. After 370 going and the change in the climate within the country, there is no way in which that level of support, which earlier existed in 2000, 2001, you see the climate was different in the 80s and in the 90s and the earlier part of the closing era of the last century. You see, when you're talking about those 2 decades, it is a different world. It is a different world now. It is not going to happen. So the consequences to India will be, well, we would have lost a very large part of our effort which is there, though we will still retain the goodwill. But I think all the other neighboring states are in for trouble. And if the Hazaras actually flee into Iran, which I thought they won't, but if they do, then I'm afraid there's trouble for Iran too. Nobody wants refugees these days. That is my view, Frank.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ambassador, coming back to you now, you'll talk about another development that has been making news concerning India, of course, and Taliban and the channels that we opened with the Taliban. Several media reports spoke about the talks that we had in Doha with the Taliban. So, your thoughts on that? And we are also engaging with factions of the Taliban which have nothing to do with Pakistan and Iran. So, how do you think that's going to go?
Frank, let me put it like this. Given the state of play and the way things are panning out in Afghanistan, you have little options but to deal with even those that you earlier determined were not good people you won't want to deal with. Of course, you will try to make some kind of differentiation. People will tell you, here is someone who is good from among the bad, here is someone who is bad from more bad than the others. Of course, that will happen. But remember this, as being large regional players, if not players in the global sense of the term, you have to have some channels open with everyone. Remember the most disastrous element, that of that aircraft. I don't want to go back into all of that, but you need to have some channels. The channels may not be good. General Katoch points out to the fact that there is a changed India, maybe, maybe not. But the fact of the matter is that whoever comes in there or whichever mishmash remains, if there is a certain kind of feeling that, look, there is some advantage in A, not troubling India, B, trying to gather something from whatever you can get from India, not a bad idea. Look, in my personal opinion, Pakistan remains the great, let me say, thorn in this entire Afghanistan business. Afghanistan has always had a tough life. Sometimes their life used to be very good when we were, one part of the British Empire or even before that. The Afghans were having a great time in northern India. But all of that has changed tremendously with this Pakistan coming about. And I talk about all the way from 1947. Till the 1970s, Pakistan couldn't do much because geopolitics was in such a manner. The Soviet Union came right up till that particular end, and that was a very, very huge and powerful entity. But they took advantage of the changes, and they've really gone into, poking that particular thing. They have their own ideas about what it does, giving them a certain hinterland vis-a-vis India, for fanning terrorism, etc. But frankly, some kind of methodology of restraining Pakistan. And I noticed that the other panelists are very clear that Pakistan may right now think it's all hunky-dory, but it will not be. In the end, as the directly neighboring country, and one which has reveled in interfering in that country, will be paying the highest price for all of this. Now, whether they would accept it or not, I don't know. But frankly speaking, as far as we are concerned at this moment, yes, we need to have some kinds of lines open to everyone. And I don't mean that means too much, but let us also remember there is this China factor in Afghanistan. India shares a 106-kilometer border with Afghanistan called the Wakhan corridor. Most people have forgotten about it because it happens to be at that POK area. I don't know what technology can do in the future, but the Chinese were nowhere near Afghanistan earlier. But now technology allows many things to happen. For me, the critical thing for India is that we need to ensure that we have a slightly better sense of relationship with the Russians. They are going to be players there. Let us not keep on buying this one theory that they are history and past. No, they are not. They are players, they are nearby, and let us remember Tajikistan borders Afghanistan, and the entire issue with Iran, etc. There is an entire Russian element, and I think we need to, play that a little bit. Of course, in all of this comes the entire issue of how people perceive India. I mean, are we simply going along with a Western perception of all of this? Then there are lots of issues, but it will require fleet-footedness. It would require also a fair degree of smartness and a degree of, having feet in several balances at the same time. I think it's critically important for us.
Absolutely. Very well said. Very, very well said, Ambassador. And I don't think anyone could have put it in a better way. All right, time to get quick closing comments now from all my panelists for the best way forward, starting first with you, Mr. Sinha.
Best way forward, of course, for us is to work with the other countries and all, because we do have limitations in what we can do in Afghanistan. And it's good also. We should not get involved in the internal politics of Afghanistan. That is a mistake. Pakistan is likely to shoot itself in the foot. You can create wars, you can't stop wars. Why would you create instability in the neighborhood? But a country which gives nuclear technology to its neighbor, Iran, is capable of any amount of strategic missteps along the way. Danger is spillover. I agree completely. It will not spill over to India in that sense. Let us not be too worried. But obviously, we need a stable Afghanistan for the region to be stable. Our common neighbor has to be kept under control. Otherwise, as you saw in Jammu, use of drones, technology is really making a difference. So I think way forward for the country is sad. It will go through much more violence. But I think to force the neighbors then to reassess themselves, Russia included. Russia, China, Turkey, Pakistan work together on Afghanistan very closely. It will force them to reassess and hopefully find some solutions towards peace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. General?
Frank, I think, very frankly, when we are looking at both the political and the diplomatic effort, which is, which India has put in, it is not something that, you can say that, okay, we can only win and we won't lose. This is the game in which your options are devoted to losing, you see. So it's simply a question of how much are you going to lose? It isn't that in option A, I'm going to win ABC and lose XYZ. In this way, all the options which are open to India, there are going to be problems and we will have to cut our losses. I think both politically and diplomatically, we will handle it well, that to the extent that it won't be a win-win situation, but we'll cut our losses. We'll maintain good relations with the people of Afghanistan. I see no doubts in that. I think with the regional players, our political and diplomatic outreach will remain. I personally feel that, having an outreach toward the Taliban, there is no problem. I mean, if the Afghan government is talking to the Taliban, then why shouldn't India? So to that extent, I mean, we need to talk to every player. Please remember that when we stopped talking to the Myanmaris many years ago, the only people who lost out was India. So you see, they may have a military government, they may have a different sort of a system. That doesn't mean we stop talking. We must keep talking. If we stop talking, then I see no reason why we are talking to Pakistan or China. Let us face facts. So talk to everybody. Ultimately, the government will make its own decisions. In the field of, in foreign policy, regardless of the type of government which we have in the center, that has been very stable. And Indian interests have always been maintained. So I have no doubts about that, regardless of the regime which is in power in center, it's got nothing to do with that really. I think both the political and the diplomatic establishment have done human service in Afghanistan. They are in for a little bit of a hammering now, but that's everybody's going to get hammered, and they will cut their losses. But ultimately, I think we will come out of it a bit stronger, and let's see as to how it goes. Frank.
Absolutely. And Ambassador, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Uh, Frank, I know that these are not the most propitious of times for us as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Not only is the angle that we were supporting for such a long time, the Western dominated kind of situation which kept things under control, sort of running away from the scene. There are other angles of Pakistan, China, and so on and so forth, which are mushrooming. But it remains for me very important that we keep ourselves engaged with Afghanistan. The level of engagement may not be at that high level, but it needs to be sufficiently high. I also do believe, perhaps because I am a committed multilateralist, I think this is a matter that we should be willing to take to an institution like the United Nations, maybe even the Security Council, talk about them. Because, there is an interest for many countries, many large stakeholders, the United States, the Chinese, the Russians, even Britain and France. There is an issue there. And in a sense, it's only Pakistan, that too because of a limited understanding, or rather a short-term gain that they see for themselves, who may want to keep this out. Will the Chinese easily go along? I don't know about that. But we need to keep this engagement there. We need to be involved, of course, with all sides, Taliban, etc. But I personally think this is one of the areas in which conversations regarding Afghanistan with key stakeholders at the United Nations might perhaps be a way forward also for our engagement and perhaps for keeping things somewhat under control. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. So what's coming out of this discussion is that the meeting between Ghani and Biden comes at an awkward time and will not lead to anything. The US withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan is a reality, and the Taliban's rise will be problematic for the region and all the key players. There is a high chance of civil war taking place. For India, it's not a matter of what we can gain, but how best we can cut our losses. There won't be a direct impact on India, but what's happening in Afghanistan concerns us as a region is of importance to us. We should proactively engage with Russia to ensure that we have a strong say in Afghanistan and the region. Well, before I go, let me inform you about Bharata First Knowledge Center, an initiative that will help each one of you and transform the way you learn. You can go to our website kc.bharatafirst.com for more details. Ensure that you look at the FAQs. Most of our questions or your questions will be answered there. Register now and avail the limited period early bird discounts. The orientation is on the 30th of June and live classes start July 1st. So register at kc.bharatafirst.com right now. Thank you once again for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. You can subscribe to our newsletter as well to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs a daily Big Picture quiz. Please do participate by going through the description in Big Picture videos. Here are the UPI IDs for those of you who would like to come forward and contribute. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. In case you have trouble with the UPI IDs, you may use our payment link in the description below and follow the steps. All this information, along with some must-see recommendations, are in the description of this video. Please go through it. That's it from me. See you again next time.